Welcome to Poetry Lockdown, day 70. And there were about 7 days, if you've been tracking, that have kind of been lost days because I was in the hospital. So if you're wondering where the big jump was, that's why. I'm excited to actually bring to you one of my own new poems. It's actually just going to be published this summer in a literary journal called Dappled Things. Great magazine. They publish some really fine poets and writers, and they actually published an essay that was in my first book of poems too. So I've got real loyalty and gratitude to Dappled Things. So check them out; they're good. So also thank you to Colleen Weir, Noletto. I think I got your married name correct there. Colleen and I are friends from way back in Catholic U days. We were both graduate students there, and she requested a poem that I wrote. So like I told my students, I think it's very important to memorize and know the work of others, but also throw your own hat into the ring, right? Especially if you love the craft and art. So this poem is called Dante. It's going to be part of my second collection whenever I finish that. And it's really about my first year teaching, which is now 15 years ago. And it was in a little village in Belize, Benque, Viejo del Carmen. I think anytime you write autobiographically in your poetry, I hope that you do so with the idea that there's something that any reader can stumble into, whether or not they know your story, because I know I'm not a famous person or anything like that. But the reason I chose this moment of my life history is just because it was a moment I was completely and utterly unprepared for. Recently graduated from a university and now teaching in a Central American village. I didn't really know the language of Spanish all that well, which is the predominant language that's spoken in this village is on the border with Guatemala. I never taught anything before, let alone English. And then someone handed me the keys, a good principal, actually, who just commented in the last one, David Ruiz, handed me the keys to a classroom of young people, one of which was the same age as I was. And I think sometimes actually being completely and utterly unprepared for something allows you to be transformed. And that was definitely the case for me. And Dante was part of that journey. So here we go. Dante, poem by yours truly. Dante, they used to call out when they saw me on the streets of their village. I was 23 years old. They were 17. Dante, they called, because that was the book I made them read. All 33 pinche cantos of the Inferno. I can see them still. All 33 boys from my third form class in Benque, Belize. Heads bent low over the packets of poetry. From seat to seat I moved in the silence, looking over their shoulders as they read or pretended to. Dante, they called. Maybe they hated him, but I want to think I was okay. Okay, this gringo doing his year of service. Okay, in a limited sort of way. Okay, in the I came, I saw, I had my world kicked in kind of way. Okay, in the I could pack my bags and go home kind of way, which after a year I did. Dante, they called to me while they ran past, hopping over rocks on the banks of the Mopon River. I swam too, but not as fast. I swam alone, not like them in schools, those 17-year-old boys from my class, now the same age as my wife. That's the funny way of time. The funny way of poetry makes memory unlimited. In those days, I didn't know to hunger for my wife because I hadn't met her. I didn't know to hunger for justice because I hadn't tasted it. I was thin as November ice. I knew nothing, and I was a teacher. I was a teacher, and I knew nothing for myself, so I taught you, Dante. Dante, exile makes you sound too fancy, but you were kicked out of your home. You couldn't go back. You were a refugee. You know better than anyone. Just because everyone knows everyone doesn't make anyone safe. The dogs of Benque were ragged things. At night, walking home from the school, I didn't know who to be more afraid of, their flashing teeth and hoarse barking, or the men by their sides in the shadows cradling their beer, a glaze over their eyes that sometimes sparked if I looked at them. And I'd pick up my pace, and my heart would thump a new quick beat in the dark. Dante, Dante, flash forward 10 years from Benke, from my third formers, the Mopon River. See me writing my own poem now. It is as judgy as myself, as full of me. I see my archbishop's deputy chewing on his master's brain as your Ugolino chewed Ruggieri. I thought I was very clever to use your words to paint my church. I liked throwing the judgment stone. My picture was important work, I told myself, though a day of listening to the kids I teach was better for my soul than 1,000 poems like that one. Dante, Dante, all my life judgment has been more real to me than Jesus. Even though I know his blood drops down even into hell, even though when he was crucified the very rocks cracked in 2 and 3 and 4. Dante, Dante, on one of the last days of class, we read your 33rd canto, my third formers and me. Ugolino confessing his sin to you, painting the scene. How he was trapped in the tower with his little boys, how he watched them starve one by one, how he ate them up with his own mouth and teeth before he died. I read it aloud because that was the way they understood the words best. I read it aloud and cried fat, wet tears, imagining that father and the hole in his heart, the coldness of the ice, the love that wasn't there. Thank you for listening to my poem, and thank you to my very first students 15 years ago in Benque Viejo del Carmen for all that you taught me. I know I was not a great teacher, but I really did learn a lot from you, and I hope this poem honors you and your lives. Have a great Sunday, everybody.